Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Now, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. One more. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mishnapad Paramahansa Parikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad of Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad of Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Welcome. It's your first time? Yes. So we're going to be studying. You familiar with the Bhagavad Gita at all? A little bit. Okay, that's enough. So we are on page 295. And let me just get this. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Tapas, you there? No, he's in India.
Not yet.
I'm sorry? Who's that?
Someone said not yet.
He's
Not yet.
still not here yet.
Okay. Well, you know what verse we're on? You were here yesterday. Is it 42? I think it's 42.
Could be 40.
Yeah, I think it's 42.
I'm not sure. I think we did.
Yeah, we did 42. 43 then. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. Page 296. Okay. Okay, sorry. Give me a break. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 On this 21st day of September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are still in Dhyana, the chapter called Dhyana-yoga, chapter 6, the yoga of meditation. Text number 43 on page 296. Tatra tam buddhi sangyogam labate pavadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. All right, I'm going to wait for Bob. You might have the book that has a different pagination. Chapter 6, text 43. You can look at the yeah, chapter 6, text 43. You can look in the gutter at the top of the page, right in the middle, and you'll see the numbers. You got it? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, here we go. Tatratam buddhi sangyogam labate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. Tattatam buddhi sangyogam labate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. Tattatam buddhi sangyogam labate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. Tattatam buddhi sangyogam labate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. Tattatam buddhi sangyogam labate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya samsiddhau kurunandana. Anyone online want to try? Guess not. Okay. I'll read it word by words. Tatra, thereupon, tam, that, buddhi sangyogam, revival of consciousness, labate, gains, parvadehikam, from the previous body, yatate, he endeavors, cha, also, tataha, thereafter, bhuyaha, again, samsiddhau, for perfection, kurunandana, O son of Kuru. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, on taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. Purport. King Bharata, who took his third birth in the family of a good Brahmin, is an example of good birth for the revival of previous transcendental consciousness. King Bharata was the emperor of the world, and since his time this planet has been known among the demigods as Bharata Varsha. Formerly it was known as Ilavrata Varsha. The emperor, at an early age, retired for spiritual perfection, but failed to achieve success. In his next life, he took birth in the family of a good Brahmin and was known as Jadabharata because he always remained secluded and did not talk to anyone. And later on, he was discovered as the greatest transcendentalist by King Rahugana. From his life, it is understood that transcendental endeavors or the practice of yoga never go in vain. By the grace of the Lord, the transcendentalist gets repeated opportunities for complete perfection in Krishna consciousness. I definitely remember reading that yesterday. Yeah. So let's go on. And we'll sum up the whole thing. Text 44. We're on page 297. 297. Purvabhyasena tenaiva urete yavasho pisaha Jigyasurapi yogasya Shabda brahmati vartate. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. Purport. Advanced yogis are not very much attracted to the rituals of the scriptures, but they automatically become attracted to the yoga principles, which can elevate them to complete Krishna consciousness, the highest yoga perfection. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 3.33.7, such disregard of Vedic rituals by the advanced transcendentalists is explained as follows. Aho bata shapachoto gariyan yajjigbhagre vartate namatubhyam te pustapaste juhavu sasnaraya brahmanuchur nama gunanti yete. This is spoken by Devahuti to her glorious son Kapiladev. O my Lord, persons who chant the holy names of your lordship are far, far advanced in spiritual life, even if born in families of dog-eaters. Such chanters have undoubtedly performed all kinds of austerities and sacrifices, bathed in all sacred places, and finished all scriptural studies. The famous example of this was presented by Lord Chaitanya, who accepted Thakur Haridas as one of his most important disciples. Although Thakur Haridas happened to take his birth in a Muslim family, he was elevated to the post of Namacharya by Lord Chaitanya due to his rigidly attended principle of chanting 300,000 holy names of the Lord daily. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And because he chanted the holy names of the Lord constantly, it is understood that in his previous life he must have passed through all the ritualistic methods of the Vedas known as Shabda Brahma. Unless, therefore, one is purified, one cannot take to the principles of Krishna consciousness or become engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmiritam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Shri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So what's being explained here is Krishna's describing to Arjuna how nothing is lost in the practice of yoga. The first principle of Krishna consciousness is that we're not the body. We're soul in the body. And we're eternal. We don't die. We don't take birth. We don't get old. And we don't get sick. But the body does all those things. So this is the first understanding. And actually, I remember when I was working many years ago on Back to Godhead magazine. We don't see the magazine much anymore, but at one point this Prabhupada said this was the backbone of the movement. It was a monthly magazine and the devotees would write for it and everything. So at a certain point, in the mid to late 70s, there was all this evidence that started to, empirical evidence that started to surface for transmigration of the soul. There's this one psychologist and professional, he was a teacher, professor in Virginia, I forget his name now. And he wrote a book. He went to India because he heard and he was in touch with all kinds of scholars all over the world, that there was some children there who were able to, they would tell their mothers, I'm not really your child. I was born in this, I was born in such and such a town, and this was my aunt, so forth like this. And of course, oftentimes they didn't follow up because these are simple people, agrarian people, the town may have been 70 miles away or something. But he did. He went to the other place and he investigated and he found, yes, there was such a person named this and they died like this and like that, So he found empirical evidence of children especially remembering details of previous lives that could then be checked and confirmed. And at the same time, you had this phenomenon growing of near-death experiences. Someone has a heart attack, they're in the hospital, and they almost died. I used to work in a hospital, I know, and then they rush in and they do the paddles, you've probably seen it on the TV, and they try to revive them. A lot of times it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. And so this person has been, clinically dead for a few minutes. And they have to act very fast after the brain dies, But they're able to start up the body. And then the person comes out of it, and sometimes later when he kind of has this, he's together and he can speak. Yes, I was hovering on the ceiling, and I was watching everything. And this doctor came in, and this doctor came in, and he was able to witness it. In fact, there's one of our very own Swamis, Satchidananda Swami. I get onto dandavats.com. Some of you may have that experience. This is one of the sites of the Hare Krishna movement. And they have various speakers, and he was giving a little seminar, but he wasn't emphasizing Krishna consciousness at first. There were like 20 people on the Zoom call or something. And he was telling his own experience of almost dying and how it was so painful. He had some operation going on, and they didn't give him enough anesthesia or whatever it was. And he actually left his body. And he had this near-death experience. And then, of course, he came back in and he was able to describe what was going on. So the point is that that's simply a confirmation of what Krishna teaches. And it's not just Krishna. This is essential in the Vedic culture. All the Vedas teach that. We are not the body, we're spirit, soul. And the goal of life is to become free from the bondage and the sufferings of birth, old age, disease, and death. If you need to, you can sit on a chair or a bench. It's up to you. Okay, that's fine. You're fine. So this, when you think about it, this changes everything. Because in our ordinary life, aside from yoga or anything like that, we're pretty much identified with our particular body. We have a certain gender and so forth, background, name. We may come in a family, look up our family tree and all this. And you want to try to succeed in life. Get a good job, this and that, the various things, and get security. There's always it. So that's our focus, and that's what material life means. But as you get older, your priorities change. You have children, then it's a big thing. They're trying to bring them up nicely, get them to school. The whole thing expands. But it's all focused on the different bodily relationships. There's millions of children, but it's your fourth or two or three or four children that you're really concerned with. There's millions of women, but you're your wife or a husband like that, So this is the illusion that's built around identifying with the body. This is called the false ego, the false sense of self. And so what Krishna is giving here is the essence of Vedic wisdom. Very concisely, there's only 18 chapters here. If you take out all the purports, of course we would never do that, but it's a very small book. I remember reading the Bhagavad Gita, just translations. It's like a little paperback I read. This was back in the 60s. It was a fascinating book, but I really couldn't figure out what to do from that book. You need explanations of a realized soul. But it's a very important book because he gives the basic principle of of spirit versus matter, the existence of the soul. But he also teaches that there's a supreme soul. There's a supreme spirit who is what we call in the West God, the eternal person, who is the creator of everything, who is our best friend, who is with us at every moment in our hearts as the super soul, and is providing with intelligence and remembrance and forgetfulness, he describes here. And so the goal of human life is to try to revive our consciousness of that Supreme Soul. And we learn, in the Bhagavad Gita and other books that our spiritual master has translated, that the practical way of doing that in this world, in this age, this is an age they call the Kali Yuga, that's not so favorable for yoga, meaning that there's all these disturbances, you don't live very long, and nobody knows about it, and but still, there's a process in this age that's very efficient. Chanting the holy name, Hare Krishna. This is a very powerful mantra, and it's not something that's recently invented or anything. Some of the oldest books of wisdom in India are called the Upanishads. They're part of the Vedas, thousands and thousands of years old, and they're written by sages who experienced these things, and they themselves had realization and they wrote down. So there's one very simple one called the Kali Santarana Upanishad. I mentioned the Kali Yuga. So Santarana means complete deliverance from the Kali Yuga. And in that Upanishad, there's these two verses, one of which is, altogether, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Iti Shorshikam Nam Nam. Oh, you know the mantra? Very good, very good. She's new. What's your name? Karma. Okay, very good. Hare Krishna. Your mother must have been into yoga, huh? She was familiar. I mean, that's karma. We deal with karma. There's a chapter called karma. There's 3 chapters called karma yoga. So that's one. That's the first verse, and the second word tells you the value of this mantra. Iti shodashakam nam nam kali kalmasha nashanam natak padataro paya savavedeshu drishyate, which means these 16 names, Hare Krishna, etc. Kali Kalmasha Nashanam can destroy all the evils and ills and dangers of this Kali Yuga for us. In other words, it's a way of counteracting the difficulties of this Yuga. And if you search through the Vedas, which are very vast, you will not find a better means in this age than doing that, than chanting that mantra. So that's the central practice our spiritual master came to give. And famously, he is chanting that. He came to America with nothing, practically, except his great faith and his realization and his wonderful Krishna consciousness, and the order of his spiritual master, his guru, to spread this wonderful knowledge all over the world. And he was able to get a half a bongo drum. You've seen bongos, these little drums you play, So he had a half of one, and he would beat on that, and he would chant Hare Krishna in the park, wherever he could, sometimes for hours. And that was the middle of the 60s, the height of the hippie days, And people would stop and listen. There's a far out thing going on. And gradually they would become interested, and he would say, well, and come back to our little storefront, which is also in the area. And they would have a class, and gradually he would get followers. And the whole thing grew up. That was worldwide. We have like over 100,000 initiated devotees, and many, many followers, everywhere. So, what he's describing here, what Krishna is describing is, we're almost at the end of this chapter, and he's describing the classic process of yoga, where you sit, and you meditate, and maybe you've seen, And I used to try that, because we had, back in 71, I was studying Hatha yoga, which is the popular yoga, and it's very good for your health. You're bending and stretching, and you're stimulating different organs and things like that. Because I had a health crisis, and I was able to help with that. But along with that, they were teaching a little pranayama, which is also very good for your health and calming your mind, regulated breathing, deep breathing, and meditation. So I was, quite thin and limber, so I was able to do a lotus posture. It wasn't so easy getting out of the lotus posture, but anyway, that's another story. You did that, right? You practiced. So I'd sit, and watch the breathing, and I would try to meditate on Om. There's a famous Om. It's not easy to do that for any length of time. The mind is very restless. So then I came across this Hare Krishna mantra, and I started meditating on that, and that had a different effect. When you really meditate on the sound of the name, even internally, you know, it's very fascinating. And this is I had a kind of a lucky, I wouldn't say accident, but I had learned to play the flute. You know, I was fairly proficient at the flute. I would go on the street and play and jam with, you know, the guys. And then I saw a picture of Krishna, and he's holding a flute. I said, "Oh, let me investigate this form of God. You know, this sounds interesting." So I had that advantage. So anyway, so Krishna turns out to be the Supreme Personality of God, and he speaks this Bhagavad Gita. And what he's doing here, he's gone through different kinds of yoga. There's karma yoga, where you're very active and you know you're getting the fruits of your labor, but you don't want to be attached to those fruits, because if you're attached to the fruits of your labor, then you come back again. See, what brings us back is we have two bodies. We have what we call the body, which is the gross body, but we have our internal body. Everyone knows we have a mind, we have intelligence. And we have a sense of self, which is called the ego. Those three, they don't die when the gross body dies. The mind continues with all of these unfulfilled desires and things that we've cultivated, and they bring us to our next body. I call like a template for your next body. Now, there's all kinds of bodies. You may not, you know, the human form of body is very rare. Just think of how many bugs there are right in this little garden out here. Where's Mani Bandhana? He counted them. No, I'm just kidding. He's our gardener, devotee, very nice. But there's thousands probably, you know. What to speak, there's millions and billions and trillions of them. And they're all souls just like us. But because they didn't practice yoga and they perform sinful activity, they lost the human form and they get thrown out into that body. Gradually you come back up. There's no eternal damnation in Hare Krishna. You get another chance. You always get another chance. But it may take many years, and you go through these miserable bodies. So human life is a great opportunity, and we don't want to waste it. And the wonderful thing is that Krishna consciousness is so wonderful that if you make a little progress, just attending one Bhagavad Gita class or chanting one mantra, then you're sure of a human form, because you have to pick up where you left off in the next birth. That's what Krishna is saying here. But we want to. Why prolong the agony? Go through birth, old age, disease, and death again. I'm old age, but I lead a very simple, healthy life, so I can still, you know, dance a little bit, sing. Although I had a problem with my voice, you know. But it's no picnic. It's no picnic getting old. You know, things that you've been counting on all your life, they stop working so well anymore. Oh God, you know. So, but it's something that's the bargain. If we want to forget God, forget Krishna, and try to enjoy this material world, then we have to be in a material body, and that we go through birth, old age, disease, and death. There's actually 6 changes: birth, growth. Every parent knows that that's what's happening with the kid, right? Basically, they're growing. Birth, growth, and then you reach a stasis. You're at your, you know, fighting weight, so to speak. And then you stay for some time, and then you produce children or offspring, you know. And then gradually you get older, you know, and you dwindle, and you disappear. 6 changes: birth, growth, maintenance, byproducts, diminishment, and death. We've been doing that for millions of years. We want to end that process, because we all have a spiritual body. And this science of bhakti is awakening ourselves to that spiritual existence, which is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. No more old age, no more death, no more negativity at all. Simply living in different varieties of happiness in relationship to Krishna. So now, just back to our, there's this very important verse here in the purport, but before we get to that. So by virtue of divine consciousness, so this is an advanced yogi who hasn't completed the course. Fell away because it's difficult to complete the course. So, but nothing is lost, and by virtue of his divine consciousness, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles in the next life, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. So Prabhupada quotes this verse, and he sometimes said that all my followers that you were sent by my spiritual master. In other words, you made progress in the previous life. I mean, I've met devotees. I remember speaking to Keshava Bharati Maharaj. how he was searching, going here and there, and then when he came on Bhagavad Gita, this Bhagavad Gita that we're reading, he said, "This is what I've been looking for." He couldn't stop reading it. He read the whole thing in like 2 nights or something, in 2 days. And Vijay was the same way. Once he read this book, he said, "Where's the Hare Krishnas?" Other people say, "Oh, this is too much for me. All this Sanskrit, I don't know if I can read this," like that. So the affinities you have, just like we all have certain tendencies, we're attracted to this, attracted to that, So similarly, these spiritual, what this really says is that even the lowest person, the dog eaters, which I never was attracted to eating a dog. I had a pet, But anyway, but there's dog eaters. But even on that, say how glorious they are if on the tip of their tongue they're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. That's what this verse is, Jivagre. Somehow or other they're chanting, Prabhupada would tell, he was traveling all over the world. He came to the Philippines, where they actually eat dogs. And right? He's from the Philippines, so he's born, yeah. And, but he said when he came to the airport, there was a whole bunch of people greeted him and chanted Hare Krishna. That, his representative, Sudama Maharaj, who was very influential at a point, very good preacher. He had gotten a house and he was preaching and people were attracted. And so Prabhupada was never there and they came. You can imagine how glorious he felt, This verse may have come to mind. How glorious, because in the previous life, they performed all kinds of tapasya, austerities, and studied the Vedas, took baths in the holy places. Nama gunantiye, those who were doing that. So, I don't remember anything like that in the previous life, but maybe. But it doesn't matter. Because in this life, if you somehow become attracted, this is the greatest fortune. There's no downside to Krishna consciousness. There's only upside. We may not be able to follow it all because it's a challenge. We're so conditioned to try to enjoy materially. But we find that the spiritual enjoyment is much more wholesome. There's no like bad reaction. You want to enjoy, okay, I was part of the 60s. I used to get high every day. That was just a thing you did, And so if I was told that in the middle of, okay, you got to give all that up, I would say, forget it, that's part of my life. Everyone else is doing it, But there's a downside, You have to, even marijuana, of course, in those days, marijuana was so weak, and not like now. Now it can really damage you, But there were, heavier drugs, cocaine. Oh, this I'm together now. I got it, I was so blessed. I tried it once. I didn't like it. I didn't really notice any difference. This was like 60 years ago. Anyway, all of that goes, because the problem is it comes and it goes. You come up and you come down. And Prabhupada was right in the middle of that culture. So and the devotees were chanting Hare Krishna. They stopped taking LSD. All of them were taking it. They stopped taking any drugs. They were just chanting, and everyone was very blissful. And so they said, Prabhupada, can we make a little pamphlet? Stay high forever. To try to invite people. We said, yeah, make that pamphlet. Because this is really what we're looking for. We're looking for that blissful consciousness with no worries and no downside. But you can't find that on the material platform, but you can on the spiritual platform. So Krishna is describing this yoga, and at the end, Arjuna here is saying, I can't do it, And what if I fail? What's going to happen? Well, you get reborn. He said, okay, But then at the very end, we should go on. We can try to finish this chapter. He says, the best yogi of all is one who's simply worshipping me with great faith, who's conscious of me. And that was Arjuna. Arjuna was his best friend. And he was always thinking of Krishna. So anyway, that's the point. So we can I related to this verse when I first read it. Aho batasra pachodo guriyan. Is that from wherever you're coming from, it doesn't matter. If you're lucky enough to at least try the Hare Krishna, the chanting, then your life it opens up and becomes auspicious. Because Krishna's inside. He said, oh, they're chanting my name, And he leads you. He creates, so that you're able to take a book, read a book, and like you came here. Something led you here. Something you got a book somewhere. Yeah, you see, this is a great book distributors. Same thing with Dimitri. Got a book. He's been here for a year already. More than a year. Yeah. Hare Krishna. All right, so why don't we go on? Takes 45. We can probably finish this chapter, which would be a good goal. Prayatna jitamanas yogi samshuddha kilbishaha anek janma samsiddhas tato yati param gatim. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. Purport. A person born in a particularly righteous, aristocratic, or sacred family becomes conscious of his favorable condition for executing yoga practice. With determination, therefore, he begins his unfinished task, and thus he completely cleanses himself of all material contaminations. When he is finally free from all contaminations, he attains the supreme perfection, Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the perfect stage of being freed of all contaminations. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7:28. I'll say, you say, Yesham dvandakatam papam Jananam punyakarmanam te dvandvamohanir mukta bhajante mam jadavata. After many, many births of executing pious activities, when one is completely freed from all contaminations and from all illusory dualities, one becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, maybe those many, many births we've already been through, since we're trying to engage in the service of the Lord. And it's just a question of perfecting or intensifying that service. Because there's all of the yogas lead to this perfection. There can't be anything better than the process and the state that Krishna himself defines and that he's experiencing. In other words, the perfection is to be welcomed back into the spiritual world, to resume the activities that we stopped long, long ago when we fell to this world. This is a way of understanding it. That's why Prabhupada's immortal phrase, back home, back to Godhead, which is so telling and so inviting. It says, because we're all looking for that home, that place where we're completely comfortable, we never have to leave, right? Where we feel right at home and safe, no danger. And not only that, but it's a place where others are there. In other words, there's interactions. It's rasa. Rasa means the mellows of interaction. So that home is waiting for us. And in fact, it's within us. Even before they go anywhere, Prabhupada was back home, back to Godhead, even when he was speaking to us. This is what the great devotees do. They live on two levels. Internally, he's always remembering Krishna and his relationship with Krishna and living on that plane. He was even saying, as he was giving those lectures in 26 Second Avenue, I'm not really here because there was this loud major artery in New York, 2nd Avenue. Well, these avenues are very, very busy in Manhattan, and I used to come down that avenue on my way back home to Hempstead in Long Island. So you can imagine, there's all of this, the braking and the whirring of the engines, so he insisted the door be open. He had a little storefront because people might want to walk in. So it's very inviting if the door is open, So you can hear he's giving these lectures and the horns are going and some of the little kids are playing outside, and, So, but he's saying at one point, I'm not really here, on this river of traffic, but I'm really on the bank of the Yamuna. In other words, internally thinking like that. And we kind of reflect on that. Sometimes we daydream, if I could only be in Hawaii, I have to do this job, And so, but it's just a dream for us. But the reality is that there's a spiritual world, and that the great souls are living there, and that the really merciful ones, they come here, but they still maintain their consciousness of that world. And so that's why this Haridas Thakur, it's worth mentioning him because he came up in the purport, in that first purport. And that he was born in a Muslim family, and generally they're shunned by the Vaishnava, by the Hindu community, in those days, and vice versa. But he somehow or other, I don't know the story, how he began chanting Hare Krishna, but he did. And he became what they call the acharya, the exemplar for chanting. Prabhupada mentions he chanting 300,000 names a day. Well, recently I just calculated, because we chant 16 rounds. He was chanting 192 rounds a day. A round takes, I tried, it is practically impossible to chant a 5-minute round. It means you have to chant a mantra in less than 3 seconds. Very hard. Multiply it out. But he was chanting 5-minute rounds. And so Prabhupada, he said, yes, that took 16 hours. If you check it out, it's 16 hours every day chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But actually he was chanting a lot more than 300,000 names. Because you multiply out, 64 rounds is known as 100,000 names, but it's really a lot more. Because it all comes out, I won't bore you, it's 333,000 names a day. Hare Krishna, welcome. Now we'll be darshan in a few minutes, 15 minutes, and then we'll prasad, but if you're welcome to sit on a bench or something, we're having a Bhagavad Gita class for the next 15 minutes. Yeah. And we have books. Can you get him some books? Yeah. Please have a seat. We put in these benches recently just for you. If you really, want to get in the mood, you can sit on the floor. It's okay, but you're welcome to sit on the bench. It's up to you. So, this Haridas Thakur, he would just chant all day. And he became completely indifferent. There was one experience he had. They were very upset with him, the Muslim leader, because generally, yeah, go ahead. The Hindus would be turned into Muslims, but not vice versa, not vice versa. So he refused to recant his Muslim religion. And so they said, okay, we're going to execute you. And their form of execution was beating. They would beat with sticks. Very painful. But he started chanting and they started beating. Two big muscular guys would, and he was just chanting, and he was so absorbed in the chanting, and he didn't feel anything. And they weren't able to kill him. They went from one execute. They went one bazaar, one marketplace to another. And after 22 marketplaces, they were in great anxiety that he wasn't dying, and he wasn't showing any injury. He was protected by Krishna. It's a historical event. And so they were in all of this anxiety, and he sensed that. So he said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, if we're not able to execute you, then we'll get executed." So I said, "Oh, if that's the case, then I'll die." So he went into samadhi. It's called samadhi, and they didn't know about that. Where you almost look like you're dead, you're hardly breathing. So they said, "Okay, great." So they carried what they thought was the dead body back to the Muslim sheriff, basically. So what should we do? Should we bury him here? He said, no, this will become a place of pilgrimage, So they threw him in the Ganges, into the Ganges river. And he woke up, came out of his samadhi, swam over to the other side and kept chanting. And he said, "Haridas, you can do whatever you want." They had promised him, if you can come through this, then, they could. So he was able to tolerate that without losing his composure or anything like that. Incredible. And they also tried on another instance to allure him, to seduce him. There was an envious landowner who Haridas was getting all these accolades and everything, and he had hired a prostitute in the middle of the night. He's chanting, to see if she could tempt him. And she came and she did her thing, and he said, "We'll be together, but I have to finish my rounds." She didn't know that he never finished his rounds. So he's chanting, and so the whole night goes, and she's a little disappointed, said, "I'm really sorry. You come back tomorrow and we'll, So she went back to the guy who hired her and said, What happened? He said, "Well, he promised to be with me tonight. Then after that, you can bring your men, and he'll lose his position." So she came back, and the same thing, and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't finished my round." So she's listening, and then finally she's kind of bored, so she starts chanting also. Might as well pass the time, So the next morning, third night, she finally realizes what a great soul he is. She bowed down, surrendered, and he said, "I was ready to leave the first night, but I knew, because I knew the whole plan. But just for you, I stayed." So she said, "Well, please forgive me." He says, "That's okay. You just keep chanting, and give up your profession. Don't worry about it, You plant a tulsi tree. It's a sacred tree, and you chant. Everything will be provided for you." And she became a great devotee, very famous. People would bring bags of rice and everything. She didn't have to worry about that. So she was converted by the association of this Haridas Thakur. It's a wonderful story. And there's many other stories about him in the book called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there's a whole Badashrapachoto Guri in this verse at 44 that we chanted. And this Yesham Gandakatam Papam, when one can really become fixed in devotion, bhajanta drita vrita. This means a firm vow. When one is free from sinful activities. Because sinful life, which is summarized in four, what we call the four regs, if you're going to be serious in Krishna consciousness, you have to give up meat eating. Everyone knows we're vegetarian. But they also know that we have these incredible feasts with things like pakoras and samosas, so you forget about your meat eating. You don't really have to worry about it. So a lot of devotees, you come and you take prasadam, and that's it. That you're able to follow that. So no drugs, no gambling, and no illicit sex outside marriage like that. So these are sinful activities that keep us in the bodily concept of life and prevent us from advancing in devotional service. So Krishna consciousness. Now, if you take up the chanting, you get the spiritual strength to follow those. Krishna, you realize that Krishna will help you if you make the effort and you chant. So that's the experience of the devotees. Otherwise, Prabhupada comes into the middle of the 60s, in the middle of the sexual revolution came in the 60s, and all the drugs and everything. And how is it possible that he could get a crew together who were willing to give up these things and chant so much, and because of the power of the mantra. And Krishna is giving you the power from within. So it's a real, you can visually feel the change in yourself if you try it for a few days, and what to speak of for months and years. So, but here it has to be faith, and you can, Yesham Gwenta, what is it? In text 45. All right, let's go on to 46, and maybe we can finish tonight. Text 46, top of page 299. Tapasvibhyo diko yogi, janibhyo pimato didaka, dikaha, karmibhyas chadiko yogi, tasmad yogi bhavarjana. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the food of worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Purport. When we speak of yoga, we refer to linking our consciousness with the Supreme Absolute Truth. Such a process is named differently by various practitioners in terms of the particular method adopted. When the linking process is predominantly in fruitive activities, it is called karma yoga. When it is predominantly empirical, it is called Dhyana-yoga. And when it is predominantly in a devotional relationship with the Supreme Lord, it is called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, is the ultimate perfection of all yogas, as will be explained in the next verse. The Lord has confirmed herein the superiority of yoga, but He has not mentioned that it is better than Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is full spiritual knowledge, and therefore nothing can excel it. Asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. Empiric knowledge without surrender to the Supreme Lord is also imperfect, and fruitive work without Krishna consciousness is a waste of time. Therefore, the most highly praised form of yoga performance mentioned here is Bhakti Yoga, and this is still more clearly explained in the next verse, which I'm going to read right now, because I think maybe we can get through this purport. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana Shraddhavam bhajate yo mam Samaya yukta tamoma, excuse me.
yukta tamamata.
Okay, very good. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Purport. The word bhajate is significant here. Bhajate has its root in the verb bhaj, which is used when there is need of service. The English word worship cannot be used in the same sense as bhaj. Worship means to adore or to show respect and honor to the worthy one. But service with love and faith is especially meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can avoid worshipping a respectable man or a demigod and be called discourteous, but one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Lord without being thoroughly condemned. Every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus every living entity is intended to serve the Supreme Lord by his own constitution. Failing to do this, he falls down. The Bhagavatam 11.5.3 confirms this as follows. Ya esham purusam sakshad
Yesam purusham sakshat.
atma prabhavami ishwaram
Atma prabhavam ishwaram.
nabhajanta bhajananti sthanad brashta patantyadaha. Anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the primeval Lord, who is the source of all living entities, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. In this verse also the word bhajanti is used. Therefore bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or to any other common living entity. The word abhajananti, used in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, is also found in the Bhagavad Gita. Abhajananti ma mudha. Only fools and rascals deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Such fools take it upon themselves to write commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita without an attitude of service to the Lord. Consequently, they cannot properly distinguish between the word bhajanti and the word worship. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in bhakti yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in bhakti yoga. Yoga actually means bhakti yoga. All other yogas are progressions toward the destination of bhakti yoga. From the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma Yoga, without fruit of results, is the beginning of this path. When Karma Yoga increases in knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called Dhyana-yoga. When Dhyana-yoga increases in meditation on the Supersoul by different physical processes, and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga-yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga-yoga and comes to the point of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, it is called Bhakti-yoga, the culmination. Factually, Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal, but to analyze Bhakti Yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name: Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, or Dhyana Yogi, Raja Yogi, Hatha Yogi, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga, just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune that one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. The ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shyamasundar, who is as beautifully colored as a cloud, whose lotus-like face is as effulgent as the sun, whose dress is brilliant with jewels, and whose body is flower-garlanded. Illuminating all sides is illuminating all sides is his gorgeous luster, which is called the Brahma Jyoti. He incarnates in different forms such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he descends like a human being as the son of Mother Yashoda, and he is known as Krishna, Govinda, and Vasudeva. He is the perfect child, husband, friend, and master, and he is full with all opulences and transcendental qualities. If one remains fully conscious of these features of the Lord, he is called the highest yogi. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by Bhakti Yoga, as is confirmed in all Vedic literature. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyate katatayarta prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. This is from Shvedashvatara Upanishad 6.23. Bhaktirasya bhajanam tad iha mutropadi nairasya mushmin manak kalpanam etad eva naishkarmyam. Quote, Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or in the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb the mind in the Supreme. This is the purpose of Naishkarmya. Gopaltapani Upanishad 115. These are some of the means for performance of bhakti or Krishna consciousness, the highest perfectional stage of the yoga system. Thus end the Bhagavad purports to the 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the manner of Dhyana-yoga. So we're going to have to adjourn now, and we're going to have the kirtan in a couple of minutes. But it's worth rereading this chapter and this whole book. And Krishna will now explain, in the beginning of chapter 7, a practical way in which everyone can learn to see Krishna everywhere and be fully Krishna conscious, by seeing him first within this material energy, because it's all his. So you're all invited back to come. Or you can catch us online. We have it. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.